There it is. We're recording.
There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about urban eco-blocks with Bobby, Steve, and Rosalind. I see is here. Any other board members that you would like to introduce?
No, but if Bobby and Rosalind would like to introduce themselves real quickly, that would be great.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Rosalind Williams. I'm a retired city planner, and I am one of the original board members of EcoBlock.
Cool. Bobby, are you online? Great, there you are.
I'm sorry, my camera was not wanting to open up in Zoom because I had it open up on the computer. But I'm Bobby Bonner. Most of you know me from the After School Labs, STL. But this is the development side, the sustainability side. And so I'm on the board. I've been on the board probably a little over a year or so before pandemic, right, Steve? And this is where I met Steve O'Rourke in the sustainability lab. And after one meeting, we probably sat there an hour or so and didn't realize the time. It was going on another hour talking about sustainability. So I ended up becoming a board member and really, think this concept is really great, especially for a city that's on the revitalization and we're just getting started. So I'm gonna turn it over to Steve, and he's the lead on here. So go ahead, Steve.
All right. And go ahead and share my screen here.
Yeah.
All right. Can you all see that?
Yeah, we see your desktop.
Oh.
What's that?
We see your desktop.
Oh.
It's a lovely tent. I like your internal illumination.
This is interesting. I hit share screen. It was like, which screen do you want to share? And I said screen 3. Are you all seeing it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So this is actually the third time we presented. The first time I noticed, Aaron, was back in October of 2017. And then we did another presentation in 2018, and just a lot has happened since then. So this will be a nice update, but if anybody has seen this before, it'll be kind of a reminder of sort of what this is all about. The mission statement, it's kind of like a big haiku here: reimagining the urban block as an ecological, social, and economic unit to facilitate equity, efficiency, and democracy. There's a lot packed in there. We probably debated that, or not debated, but we crafted that over probably a 2-day period. But this is all about, the big piece of it on this is social equity and sustainability. Kind of a general overview of what an eco-block is. The big part of this is revitalizing abandoned real estate. We'll talk a little bit about this form-based code that we've created called the Eco Code, that's designed to promote mixed use. So rather than just a bunch of a block that's all residential, it'll be a lot of mixed use, commercial, retail, etc. The other big feature about an eco block is rather than having an alley running down the center of the block, this would have a common center design. And we'll look at that a little bit more to see what that looks like. I mentioned the social aspect, ethnic, racial, age, income diversity. So we're looking to have affordable housing on a community land trust to maintain affordability. And we'll talk some more details about that. Net zero energy and water. The goal is to be net zero energy using a variety of energy efficiency and conservation along with renewables. And then net zero water with black and gray water systems and stormwater management and the like. The big piece of this is having a neighborhood that's just walkable. So you notice there's no garages here. There'd be a central garage and where people have bike shares and car shares, and right next to transit. And so a neighborhood where they can also have maker spaces and the like, generally just for happier and healthier living. So if we think about, the block has been the basis of our urban design for years. And this is what, a lot of St. Louis, Missouri looks like, North City in particular. We've got over 30,000 vacant parcels, either, half vacant buildings and just vacant land. And so this is our challenge. We have this enormous challenge to salvage some of these buildings before they fall down, and so much that's in need of reinvestment. So in working with the city, we put together our model eco code, and they've actually adopted this planned unit development. But what they asked us to do, they wanted to get a better sense of what does this look like. So we actually hired an intern to go through and put together, using SketchUp, put together a rendering of what this might look like. So what we did is we picked just a sample block. Now, if anybody lives anywhere near here, don't get all excited. It's not like we have any interest in particular in this block, but this is Kings Highway over on the east, and this is the Academy neighborhood, Academy Avenue over on the west, and then between Kensington and Enright. This is just north of Del Mar, okay? But this is what this block currently looks like. There are a couple of businesses over here on Kings Highway and this St. Louis Adult Learning Center. I don't know if that's still in operation, but a lot of vacant land, some vacant buildings, but there is some life in the block still. So what we're talking about doing is seeing, first of all, what can we salvage? Which homes, which buildings are salvageable, which ones are, and so we actually did a survey and looked at each of these buildings, and we came to the conclusion that these buildings would be worth keeping. Okay. So this is what it would look like when it's filled in. We've got a community garden over here. We've got a playground. We've got stormwater management in the center. We've got greenhouses. There's an access zone that would come through a central garage. Here's another piece of the access zone. But all of these are new buildings built around these old buildings, and the old buildings would be renovated to be just as energy efficient. Here, a big feature is having a block level ground source heat pump, geothermal, ground source heating and cooling. There's economies of scale with this that would make, this much more cost effective and really reduce the cost of heating and cooling dramatically. The fact that we have very high efficiency building envelopes are already going to make the need for heating and cooling much less. So we'll be very efficient, but then we'll also have rooftop solar, we'll have community solar. You see just a whole lot of solar. A lot of the buildings were oriented with south-facing roofs so that we could maximize the solar on that. So we also, there'll be adjacent blocks, and there's going to be flow going kind of from these other blocks into the urban eco block. So this will become kind of an anchor for the community. And then you see we've got a combination of single family and multifamily here on the west side. And then over on the east side along Kings Highway, here's where we'd have the mixed use. We'd have retail and commercial down at the block level. And then we would have apartments or condos up at the top. There'll be the car share and the bike share, so I wanted to go over some of the design principles, the 8 design principles: social equity, urban design, water, transportation, landscape resilience, energy, and public health. The social equity, the big piece of this is going to be community engagement. This isn't something where we'll have a developer come in and say, here's what we're going to do. This is where we come in and we say, we find out who's living in the block and living around the block, and what is it that you want to do. we present the idea of the urban eco-block, but really engaging the community so that they feel a sense of ownership. Again, a big piece of this is the diversity. And we talked about different forms of ownership. There could be rentals, rent to owns, there could be condos, there could be, we'll have cooperative covenants where there are some agreements around which we're going to live. And then a big feature would be community land trust. This would, where the land would remain in a trust, and that way, while the buildings on the land may be able to be bought and sold, the land still belongs to the trust. And so that would help us maintain the affordability to minimize gentrification. Again, we talked about in the urban design, we talked about designing around a common area rather than the alley. This gives us an opportunity for more social engagement. And we'd have a lot of shared amenities like garden and tool storage, and just an opportunity to minimize the footprint of each home. Public health, the way we want to foster public health is to create walkable and bikeable paths to encourage exercise. We'll want to have the community garden, excuse me, to promote healthy produce grown locally. There'll be a playground and an opportunity to work and play in the green spaces. One of the things we talked about, the restrictive covenants, is agree that we're not going to use toxic building materials and chemicals. So people will know, here's what kind of cleaners you can use so that you're not creating a toxic environment. And ultimately, just a place for rest and contemplation. As far as the landscape, we're interested in having native plants, the whole idea of urban agriculture and edible landscape where we have plants that we can eat. Water, I mentioned that we were interested in making net zero water, and a big piece of this is stormwater management and recharging our groundwater, but it's also black water and gray water systems as well. The resilience piece of this is essentially building this building like with SIP panels or I'm thinking I'm blanking on the insulated concrete forms, buildings that are earthquake proof to begin with, and then also that we would have a microgrid in case we did have a power outage. There'd also be passive lighting and ventilation. So that we're minimizing our need for outside help, and of course also community assistance just within the block itself. There's a number of ways to net zero energy, but the keys are energy efficiency and conservation, and then couple that with renewable energy. So we mentioned the building envelope, the geothermal to minimize energy used in space conditioning, lighting and controls. We also want to have monitoring of energy use to give a feedback loop so that people know how much energy they're using and where they're wasting energy. So again, this is where people are encouraging each other to reduce energy consumption. And I mentioned again the microgrid, which would be solar based, and that could also have a biofuel-based generator for base power, for backup power, but then a lot of battery storage. And this power could also be dispatchable to the grid in the event that it's needed. The utility could actually own that microgrid. And then transportation, again, we wanted to focus on walkability, on EV car sharing, that central garage, so everybody doesn't have their own garages. So ideally, this is going to be located near potential job centers like the NGA, along public transportation or bike routes, and certainly we want to keep this within biking distance of retail and community services. So that's the urban eco-block. Lots of stuff here. I went through this very quickly, but I wanted to have some time for questions. So let's open up the floor.
I don't mind jumping in real quick. This is cool. This is cool to see. I have, so just kind of a comment real quick to start, because a lot of these design features, like, so I don't know how much you partner or look at other things. I know you guys are super on this, but I lived in Freiburg, Germany for a while, and they have a sub-district called Vauban, which was like an old barracks, and they redesigned it to have like a lot of the same features that you have here. So I guess my first question or thought was to design this, because it's awesome. What other kind of like partners or groups or countries or networks is EcoBlock working with or collaborating with to like share ideas, or has that happened, or is there a need for that, or is this just because you guys are awesome city planners and this is what you came up with?
You know, thanks for that, Morgan. I really could have expounded a little bit. You know, we have been working a lot to lay a foundation and working with the city of St. Louis, the planning and zoning department, to create this eco code, which is going to be the foundation of any eco block moving forward. We're getting ready to solicit proposals from developers, but we're sort of preparing for that. Bobby has been very engaged with the GeoFutures and the whole St. Louis Area Working Group. We're actually giving a presentation to the St. Louis Area Working Group tomorrow. You know, very interested in the work that Bobby's doing in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood. And so there's just, we're on the cusp of creating something, you know, the working prototype. I mean, that's really what we're interested in doing first. This is not limited to St. Louis. This is something that we could take to any urban city. And I welcome Rosalind and Bobby to kind of jump in and offer their thoughts as well.
We're collaborating to some degree with urban eco districts because we think that this could be a basic unit of an eco district. This would not be just one block, but it would grow in the area. And so it could serve as a one unit, one block could serve social service kinds of things or daycare, and another block could have more commercial or whatever. So it is more of a community of blocks. We've been also working with WashU's architecture school, as well as Ball State. And what was the other, was there another school that we were involved in, Steve?
Yes. And why am I blanking on that?
Well, yes. And then in Berkeley, there is a similar concept that actually takes all of the utilities around the edge of the block instead of using the center. And they're trying to create a net zero block like this.
It was Purdue.
To get more collaboration with other people who've done it or who are thinking about it.
It was Purdue.
Okay.
Purdue, in addition to Ball State and WashU, and then we'd also been working with MS&T on the energy piece, the microgrid piece.
Yeah, and we presented this also to the City Department of Planning and the Zoning Department. So
Right.
they've taken a look at it, and I think we originally came in as a PUD, right, Steve? And now I think they took the zoning on as part of what could be zoned here in St. Louis. So that's one step closer. And then I think our presentation with the SLOG tomorrow will kind of give us more insight into developing around in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood around the NGA complex. I think I saw somebody in the chat asked were we close to it. And so that's where we are now, is presenting it to the city and its working groups.
I have a question about can you just talk more about the ways, besides, if there are any, besides keeping the land in a community land trust, of trying to avoid gentrification?
What was it? What was it? The second part of the question about community land trust and education?
Oh, no, gentrification. How,
Gentrification, yeah.
what other, if any, steps are in place to try to avoid serious gentrification?
I'll take that.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Rosalind.
Okay. We have a built-in kind of a covenant of affordability at various income levels. So, but the combination cannot be greater than 20% low income. That's to maintain the mixed income so that you don't get concentrated poverty, and you have a viable block and real estate. So that's in the kind of the covenant or the code within that. I don't know. We can. There was questions about whether you can enforce that through zoning, and I think you can. You know, with inclusionary zoning kinds of provisions. But we want to gentrify. We want, you know, that it's a toxic word, but very few people understand it. You want to make it as mixed income as you can,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not necessarily gentrification. That's just a healthy real estate environment.
Right, right.
So in the process as well, we're addressing the regentrification by including the existing residents, and we want their input in the community and part of the planning, the discussion process, so that they would know, you know, where we're going and steps we're taking and how the community land trust would benefit them when we get into the social economics of the urban eco block, because we have to deal with that as well as the low income housing, mixed income housing. That way you get some type of market value above the low income. And it's just to get the input to make it community based is really where we would ensure that there would be no gentrification going, that we as a group collectively, we have control over that type of discussions.
Thank you.
I have, this is Hannah. I have curiosity about just management. I live in a condo association, and it's small enough that we have a board and we basically manage ourselves. And with all the different elements, both maintenance and financial, and with rental units potentially for housing, and even just facilitating all the neighbors to come together, how do you see the management into this?
It's a tricky question. We were talking about the land trust to manage not only the affordable housing portions, but also the utilities, the geothermal heating and solar things. So all of the utilities would be a part of a land trust and a cooperative management structure. I don't think we've gotten into more detail on that. We have discussed this with someone in, was it Cleveland? This is before the pandemic. Everything else is
Detroit.
gone through my head here. But there's a very long standing cooperative in Cleveland, I think it is, that has managed to maintain, you know, properties affordable. I don't like using the word low income, because you want to just have affordability at different levels, rather than labeling. You want people to be able to grow in wealth as well. And so you
Right.
don't want to pigeonhole them into something that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Hannah, you know, what I would add to that is we would certainly have trustees that are managing the land trust, but the big piece of this is to have democracy. So it's to have this be managed by the people who live there. You know, to have a like a kind of like a community improvement district or whatever, to have a board of governance where people are governing themselves and creating their own rules, you know, within a framework that they've all agreed to begin with. So, and you know, we'd envision that there would be people who live in the eco block, who actually work in the eco block, taking care of the management of, you know, of the common grounds. And so, you know, that would be part of their, you know, part of their rent, if you will, or, you know, that they have a job to support themselves to live in the neighborhood.
Hey, similar to that, there was another question in the chat about estimated costs. And he referred to cost and startup capital. So I guess there could be multiple ways to ask you about costs, like whether you know or have estimated how much it would cost per unit, or what it would cost, what you need to get it started to make a loan, or if you have like a total project cost. Do you have any cost estimates? I'm not asking for all those. There's just a lot of different ways it can go.
I don't know, Rosalind, would you be willing to offer anything there?
No.
I mean, you know, this is certainly going to be, you know, a multi-million-dollar investment development in an eco block. And how many millions of dollars, we don't know. But, you know, you're talking about a lot of buildings and a lot of infrastructure. And so the big thing, I think, is that the operating cost of the buildings are going to be very low. And so there'll be a big investment up front in the infrastructure, but then the ongoing cost is going to be minimal.
I think this is one of the things we hope to learn from creating a model block as well. I mean, they're going to discover a lot of maybe hidden costs as well as,
Yeah.
yes, the feasibility of it.
I mean, we're certainly going to have some challenges. At this point, the only way we can do a microgrid is if the utility owns it. You know, we don't have the ability to sell energy in Missouri. Only utilities can do that. And so, you know, short of if we want to try to wall ourselves off, and you know, but I don't envision that.
Well, I mean, the theory of microgrids is that they tend to not stand alone, that there's a system of microgrids, and if one goes down, electricity from the other ones can support it, or power, however it, I mean, was my understanding that.
Well, the way, I mean, when it comes to resilience, we would have a microgrid. If we had time of use energy rates, you know, where we could be using our batteries during peak time, and then let the sunshine recharge the batteries, you know, that would be great. We don't have time of use rates here, so there's not an economic incentive for us to try to switch when we're using the battery power. So the big thing would be, if this would be more of an experiment for Ameren, where they have dispatchable power. And part of it, you know, we get part of it, but they are also able to use it somewhere else. You know, the big thing about our net zero is having a lot of rooftop and a lot of, you know, it's just the community solar is, we're not going to be able to do community solar without the utility, the community solar and the microgrid.
If I can, now one thing that community solar does, it kind of helps with costs for the residents that live within the block, because of the utilities and things like that are shared. That would be a cost to the community land trust as opposed to each individual resident. So that would allow them to be able to afford the housing because you're taking away the utility bills, you're taking away gas because we're eliminating the natural gas that flows in. So you kind of reducing some of the utilities as well for the residents will be more economical for them to participate.
There was another question in the chat about how the land trust is formed, how properties get added to the trust, and I guess, you know, it assumes vacant and non-vacant properties. I guess all happens at one time.
The expectation would be that we're going to try to assemble from the LRA. That's a big piece of about the of this urban eco block is easily purchase parcels. So, you know, we're not going to try to get into, you know, a thing where we're fighting over land. It's where this land is all easily accessible and able to put into a community land trust. So the expectation would be to do it all up front. I don't know if you had some holdout that could be added to the trust later. But that would be my expectation, is that we'd form the land trust up front and then acquire the land and put the land into the trust.
And that's the importance of getting the community involved up front, because those existing property owners, if they're willing to participate, it makes it much more simplified to get the land in the community land trust without a lot of roadblocks, I should say.
Right. That's a really big piece of this is community engagement. I mean, I mentioned that up front in the presentation, to get the people in the community and not just the people on this block, but the people, you know, Rosalind mentioned earlier about the eco district and that this urban eco block is just, you know, one piece of a larger development, if you will, or and so, you know, these adjacent blocks are certainly going to want to take advantage. This is going to be a little jewel in the middle of a number of blocks that everybody will want to benefit from. So
I have a question about the design. I noticed this in the middle, in the center of the block. You had a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of overlapping concepts going on there. So I'm wondering if you're intending on them all being there at once or just in certain areas. So the geothermal pretty much took up the whole internal, and then
that's underground though.
So that would be related to the recharging the groundwater. I was assuming that since that was the largest open space, that groundwater or rainwater would be directed towards the center so it can percolate through that center area, which is the most of the open space. So I was wondering about the interaction between the trees and the geothermal and the ability for the soils to percolate the water down into the groundwater.
Yeah, so the geothermal could be either vertical or land. I would imagine they'd end up being vertical loops because we have so much of it. And so I don't anticipate that. I mean, I don't know about tree roots and geothermal, frankly. We would certainly want to manage that in terms of what, you know, how that's going to work. But in some urban eco blocks may have more the greenhouse versus when I say gardens that aren't in a greenhouse, or may have more playground space, whatever. So it's all really it's all depends on what the block wants, what the residents want, and how we use the common ground. You know, we may not have space for you know, for much community solar. So it may be that, you know, we end up putting community solar on an adjacent block. So it's all very flexible in terms of what we do and how we do it. I'm kind of chuckling at Kyle's question about what motivates us to keep fighting for this. And I'm glad you put that in quotes, because I don't like to think that we're fighting, but we are certainly tireless in our advocacy, because we all believe in how important this is for just so many reasons. You know, it's important that we redevelop our North City. It's important that we create a social some social equity for the marginalized. It's important that we you know, I want to say fight climate change, that we do something to support reduce carbon emissions. It's important that we do things to, you know, support healthy food and walkable and exercise and healthy living. There's just so many things that we all agree that we think are important, but to try to put it all into one block and you know, have all aspects of lifestyle incorporated in that is ambitious, but we just believe in it, and we think that if people saw that this was available, that there were a lot of people who would want to live there.
That's awesome. And we know, I mean, especially here, there's just this vicious cycle of what kind of development happens, and it just gets built because that's what the local developers know how to build. And then since that's what they're building, that's what the people buy, and that's what they think they want. And we don't have enough alternatives as customers in the region about where we want to live. And I agree with you that I think maybe not everybody, but there would be a lot of people that would want to live here.
Well,
Yeah.
so related to that, first of all, salute and thank you. You make me proud to be a human, all of you, for fighting for this. And we all need some reminders as to why that's worth being proud about. But the second question is, I had a renovation done to my house in the relatively recent past. It was pre-COVID, but not real long ago. And I really struggled to find developers who were interested in, per Aaron's statement, doing things in the non-traditional way with the non-traditional supply chains. Have you all heard from developers who are interested in these ideas once the various, I guess I'll call them political hoops, have been jumped through? It plausibly was the scale of what I was asking for that scared away some of the more interested developers that may be willing to be more green. But I was just curious from the standpoint of the Aaron's statement that there's lots of vested processes. What type of reception have you been getting in the you know, making this a reality concepts?
Well, I will say that we have not actively solicited, certainly no traditional developers. We're just, you know, now that we have the Eco Code approved and you know, we're focused on getting some grants to get some more funding to do more site selection and to try to move this forward. I will tell you that, you know, 5 years or so ago, I met a developer out of Washington, D.C. who was trying to get some things going in the 4th Ward. And he loved this idea. You know, it's like trying to move it. So he continues, and I actually introduced him to Bobby. And so, you know, he continues to look toward how can he participate in this? How can his company? But, you know, we need some local money as well. So this is not my area of expertise in how to attract developers. I just happened to you know, to meet this guy, and we just really, he's in alignment with what we're talking about here. So I have to believe that there are plenty of people out there there are certainly an attractive fraction of developers out there who are interested in doing something like this.
I'll add to that, Steve. by me participating in the working groups like the Project Connect Neighborhood Working Group and the North Dakota Collaborative, as we get into discussions in those groups about development, we focus on the owners as well, more than the developers, because we're trying to plant that seed with the owners and the groups that are developing the properties to consider these best practices of sustainability in all their projects and in all their development. So no matter what project, wherever they're doing it, to consider sustainability in all the projects, whether it's physical or social, but to look at it and take that look. So when they're talking to their developers or their builders, they would mention these practices to those developers and builders, and that could at least as well generate interest because of the owners and the community are involved in the process as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby. I'm looking in the chat. Where can we find more info on the Eco Code? We've got, there's an article that talked a little bit about what the city is doing. It's like a 130-page document, and it's sort of our intellectual property. And so we don't put a whole lot of information about it specifically. And I don't know exactly how we're going to peel back the cover on that but this is what we've worked so hard to create. And so we actually have a pending blog post to talk about the latest that's going on with the Eco Code. I would encourage everybody to go out to our website and look at the design principles to get a little better, more detail on some of the things that I talked about, as well as some of the partners, the folks that we're collaborating with, and both academic partners and also sort of green building partners. And then, like I say, there's a little bit of history in there in terms of kind of steps that we've taken along the way, and some more information around community land trusts and things like that. Arian, I see you've got your residential geothermal ground source heating, and the loops have a likely lifespan of 50 years. No one mentioned any problems with tree roots. It's interesting that tree roots get into the, your stormwater laterals or your sewer laterals. And so but I would imagine that the way these geothermal, these ground source piping, that those would be not like sewer pipes. So probably not an issue then. I'm not sure if your mic is turned off. You're not muted, but we're not hearing you.
I was just saying that it's a continuous plastic pipe. So there's not like a junction where things can get in. So
yeah.
I had another question for you, which I just posted in the notes, and it was about your energy covenants, and I may have missed it. Did you state an energy covenant in your first couple slides?
Yeah, we don't have anything specific, but the idea would be that you are committed to net zero,
okay,
and that you want to responsibly use energy, and that that your energy usage, that you can see your energy usage, and you also agree that everybody else can too. And so there may be some social tips and tricks on here's how I minimize my energy use. And if they see that Joe down the street is being a real energy hog, there may be some peer pressure to say, hey Joe, why are you using so much energy? How are you using so much energy?
Oh, so transparency with your energy, not just net zero, but transparent to your neighbors.
That's the idea. Now, it's not so much that we would get down to the appliance level, but it may be, circuits, like we see somebody who's using, their plug loads are really, really high. And so, well, if you're running a, you know, a kiln in your, you know, okay, we need to know about that, you know. So it's just what we're trying to do is promote energy efficiency and conservation. And so we're not trying to be Gestapo about it, but we do want that to be part of the covenant, is that you agree to monitor and manage your energy use, as well as, you know, when I talked about not using toxic chemicals, you know, for cleaners, and, you know, no toxic paints and stuff like that.
You could require benchmarking like the benchmarking ordinance.
Uh-huh.
So that would be one
Yeah.
way to make it public.
Yeah, but again, but you know, we talked to, I talked to Phil Valco, where they did some energy monitoring for some of their university-owned residential housing, and they maintained privacy so that the other people couldn't see who was using how much energy. And I kind of asked him about, you know, where's the peer pressure, you know, to point at, you know, Sally over there using so much energy. That would be something that it is a social thing that we'd have to agree on, you know, and that's part of the covenants that we are expecting to incorporate. But again, this isn't something that we can impose on people. This is something that people have to be willing to enforce, or, you know, put into place.
Yeah, we try to want to create a sustainable lifestyle, so to speak. That way the people are practicing it naturally without, you know, making it such an issue. Recycle, you know, it's not harder to throw cans in one container as it is another, you know, and how you use, you know, your energies, and just best practices on, you know, living in the community and clean, keeping the environment clean, and, you know, just uses, like I say, it's kind of a community, you know, everybody puts in and participates, you know.
So as far as like creating that culture, because you are going to need, you know, you're kind of mandating a certain culture for people to buy into the EcoBlock with, you know, all the covenants, and it makes me, so I'm wondering, is the land trust being used to restrict resale for affordability, or is it also being used to kind of in some way culturally like filter for cultural fit the people who might buy in? Because I mean, I think those are kind of two separate, in my experience with land trusts, you know, they were kind of a financial, they kind of handled the financial part of it.
Right.
I had experience in Northern California living in a land trust property, and it was permanently affordable, so it had like resale restrictions on, and they were enforced through the land trust lease, the land lease. But then how the cooperative integrated with the land trust is kind of, it was an extra level of kind of administrative filters that needed to happen. Like the application process was actually kind of intense, and it had some unintended social impacts. It like to jump through all the financial hoops and also through the social hurdles to be deemed a fit by both the land trust and the community. It ended up with people with a very high paperwork tolerance who were able to get in. So, you know, so it was mostly very educated people, and it was very different from the other land trust properties that were held by the land trust, because, you know, those only had the affordability covenants, and so it's a very different population segment that was in those properties. And I'm just wondering if, I don't know, I mean, I love to see the developments that you guys are making on this. but it is, you know, there's a huge like timing challenge to get all the ingredients together at the right time. And I you know, it's a heroic
You know what?
struggle. Yeah.
Aaron, you're right. And I do think that the community land trust is more about the financial and just maintaining a certain level of control over the land itself and to manage, you know, it's like we talked about that somebody could buy the building that sits on the land and sell that building, but we still own the land, the trust still owns the land. And there could be, we worked with the SLU Law Clinic. Kristen, you mentioned the Great Rivers Environmental Law Center. We haven't talked with them at all, but we did work with the SLU Law Clinic, and they talked about using a combination of the covenants and the community land trust. And the covenants are more for the social kind of restrictions or agreements. And so it's like the people who create the original covenant are the, you know, that's what everybody agrees to. And then anybody who wants to buy into it basically signs that agreement, says, oh, okay, yeah, I can agree to that. And it doesn't want, we don't want to make it overly restrictive, you know, I mean, so that it would be a turnoff for people. So I don't know about, you know, how much, you know, if you're going to have to read a 100-page document. So we still have a lot of work to do in terms of putting that together. But again, we want the neighborhood to sort of drive that, you know, the community to drive what it is they want. We're giving them a whole shopping cart of things to choose from.
Steve, I wanted to add something. We're beginning to work with Grounded Solutions, you know, the national organization that deals with land trusts. And we've explained that we don't necessarily want to maintain affordable, all of the properties as affordable. We want to let them grow with the area, because we want to maintain the mixed income. We don't want to have what you call a low income community. We want a mixed income. So we wanted some of it to grow with the market, but always maintain some affordable housing within the block. And that could be in one building, or it could be all over the place. It could be any place, depending on that block. So that's, you know, that's a different use of a land trust. Usually it's to keep it as affordable for, you know, as possible. But
I'd heard you say 20% earlier. Is that right, Rosalind?
more than 20%.
Under 20%?
Under 20%, yes.
Is that, do you have like a certain number that you're also over? Like you said, I mean, if you want it to be a mixed income, then the only way I understand how to do that is to say that a certain number are going to be affordable. And then you restrict the resale of those and let the rest of them float with wherever they're going to be. Right,
right. And it would, you know, minimum of 10 to 15% or whatever. Okay. But you want to be able to balance that out. The only reason why you have areas that are concentrated in with low income or affordable housing is that because the land patterns allow the segregation of incomes. And this is what we're trying to not do in this block unit, that the market can't segregate those incomes and treat them differently, and especially if it's a racial separation. So this kind of undermines that traditional land pattern that is more homogeneous in the past, that allows the market to kind of demarcate an area. It's the Delmar Divide. You have the same land uses all in on one side of Delmar and the other side of Delmar, but that pattern of the block being very homogeneous allows it to be segregated or mistreated or dealt with in a different way.
So, how much of this will be rental versus ownership? And I live in the Central West End, and the rental rates are astronomically high. So to me, rental does not associate with any one socioeconomic strata.
Right.
But it allows for people to start renting and then move up to ownership or whatever. But so that's one question, rental versus ownership. And just as a comparison, condominiums, and some of them can be very large. When you buy in, you're given a set of bylaws that kind of outline how it's operated, which elevators you can take your pets, which elevators you can't take your pets, and on and on and on and on to parking and all kinds of operating rules. And so I don't really understand covenants and land trusts, but the idea of having bylaws is something that's existed for a long time in our real estate markets. So,
Right.
And I see those as kind of the same thing, covenants and the bylaws. It's just, this is an agreement. If you want to live here, here are the agreements, here are our bylaws. So, but in terms of the percentage of rental, you know, I mean, one of the big things that we have that we advocate for is giving people a path to ownership. And so it may be that you start out renting, but it is a rent to own.
And it all depends on that particular block and how they design their covenants. If we want this to be a universal pattern, you have to be as flexible as possible within the concept. You know, lot by lot ownership has its requirements. Zoning makes certain demands on people who own lots versus those who live in condominiums or whatever. So it's kind of a, I don't know, it could be very, very flexible depending on what the community is interested in having happen.
Another question, since a lot of it is, you know, it's a cultural effort as well to find the people who are going to live there. Are any of the people working on getting this to happen? Are you committed to living there or being a part of the development beyond the development part of it?
You know, originally I had visions of just buying a home in the city and turning it into a net zero energy home. And then I had some friends who bought a sort of a condo unit, you know, in a building in downtown Belleville. And they ended up buying the building. That was like in 2010, the builder went bankrupt. They ended up buying the building out of bankruptcy, and she moved her business there on the ground floor, and they ended up buying another unit. And but I just got really kind of keen on urban living and mixed use, you know, having residential and retail and commercial all sort of in the same block. And you know, I was planning to just have a building, and then I met Rosalind and Craig and Dan, and I heard about the urban EcoBlock, and I thought, you know, that's really cool. So do I want to live there? Absolutely.
And I was, we were one of the areas in Javendalo that we would like to see this happen. I grew up in Javendalo when I was a kid. I started kindergarten to fourth grade there. So I'd always wanted to come back and live in Jeff Vanderloo. And so this would be the perfect kind of setting if I was to live in the city in Jeff Vanderloo. I would love to live in this kind of environment.
My situation is probably different. I'm a city planner. I've been doing this for more than 45 years, and that's just kind of the way I think about things. We just paid off our house, and I'm in my 70s, so the future is who knows what.
Great. I think we're at the end of our time, so I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks, Aaron. That was a great wrap-up question. So unless you guys want to give any shout outs for any upcoming events or anything you wanted, any wrap-up comments before we hang up from our panel?
I'm going to ask something. Is there a way to stay in touch with the project? Maybe you mentioned it, like a newsletter or something like that? Or just check the website?
The best way, we're not actively doing a newsletter. We're just doing occasional blog posts. But we, at one point, we created a CRM system to capture people who are interested in staying in touch. And there is a contact me on our website that you can go to.
I'll be keeping up with the blog posts.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Bobby, Rosalind, and Steve. And hopefully sometime we'll get to meet together and discuss things in person again.
I'm looking forward to it. Aaron, thank you so much for all you do to host this. And thanks everybody for coming today. Really appreciate it. Help us spread the word.
Awesome.
Great job with the Sustainability Lab. I met a lot of people there that's been part of the process. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Marvelous conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.